I personally really enjoy Fairy Tail. I know saying that is essentially a crime in the anime space. I'd probably get less flack for saying I pushed an old lady out of her wheelchair than saying I like Fairy Tail. This won't be a deep dive into the critiques of Fairy Tail, rather than just me talking about it from my perspective. There's a really good video going through all the ins and outs of Fairy Tail by Just Stop. Check that video out. I thought it was a really good watch. I've seen Fairy Tail twice now. Yes, the entire show twice, and no. No one held a gun to my head and said, watch this dog shit ass show or I'll kill your entire family. I kinda just watched it twice to watch it, and both times I really enjoyed it. I first saw Fairy Tail back in high school when I didn't watch a ton of anime. In fact, I've only seen two other shows prior to Fairy Tail, and that was Naruto and Death Note. My first watch through, I thought it was really entertaining. I really liked the pacing of the show, and what I mean by that is the constant fights. Every episode felt like non-stop action and I wasn't bored. I could just turn my brain off and watch people beating each other up with magic. Early on in the show, they had like these magic circles or insignias that would go around everybody every time somebody casted a spell, like when Natsu was casting fireball jutsus. And I thought that was pretty dope, so I kind of missed that in the later episodes, but that just might be me. One of the big critiques of Fairy Tail is the hypersexualization of women in the show, and yeah, I can agree to that. Every fight between females in the show felt like who can strip the fastest. At the time though, my monkey brain saw big boobies and dudes punching each other and I was in awe. I couldn't have asked for anything better at the time. Now, after watching it a second time, I still think big boobies, but it does get pretty ridiculous how many times they strip. Natsu can get launched 100 feet and his scarf is perfectly fine, but as soon as Lucy gets a slap on the ass, her clothes explode, so I think that's a perfectly fine complaint. Another big complaint is the power of friendship, and let me just play devil's advocate for a minute. If you were to look at Fairy Tail versus every other guild that Fairy Tail has fought, what is it that Fairy Tail has that they don't? If you were to say plot armor, you'd probably be right, but that's not the answer I was looking for. It's friendship and the bonds that they have. Every other guild, each of their members has their own goals that they want to see through no matter what. They don't fight for each other. They fight for themselves, but Fairy Tail doesn't. Fairy Tail fights for each other, and that's why every fight they seem to mention the bonds they share is what makes them so strong. That same sentiment is shared through Blue Pegasus and later on Sabretooth. If you want to say, yeah, but that's stupid, then sure, but you're literally missing the entire point of why they fight to begin with. I don't really care if that's the reason that they get strong. I'd rather that than fucking Goku getting his shit kicked and be like, wow, Frieza, you're a really good fighter. I think I'll take this seriously now. I will say there are moments that ain't no way friendship is winning. Let me give you probably the most egregious example. In the fight between Urza and her mother, Urza gets literally tossed like a fucking basketball in PE class. Like Urza gets completely folded and ends up breaking nearly every bone in her body, except her right arm. And after Irene uses Chibaku Tensei to summon a giant meteor that would kill everybody on the continent. Look, I'm no power scaler, but I know goddamn well if that meteor hits, everybody's dying. So Urza, with nearly every bone in her body broken, launches herself up like 500 feet into the air at the meteor and slices through it, breaking it apart. Maybe the Wizard Saints can do that, assuming they're at like 100%, but Urza's literally crippled at the moment and one-shots the meteor. She did what Saitama did while falling back down to Earth, and she still has the strength to one-shot Irene. I'm not going to even bother to defend the scene, it's just straight goofy. Moving on to something I do like though, the atmosphere Fairy Tail brought is really enjoyable. It felt like you were part of the guild while watching it, and it never focused on one person. You can thank Makarov for that, but I'll touch on him in a bit. A lot of people bring up Natsu as the main character, but I really like Nux's perspective that the guild is the main character, and I agree with that. If you want to be stingy and say an entire guild isn't the main character, then Lucy is my pick. The show started off with Lucy, and I bet she has had the most screen time in the show, along with her having the most fleshed out backstory. I don't think any character comes close to being shown their entire life story other than Lucy, especially since her mom and ancestor is a pretty integral part of the story later on. So no, Natsu is not the main character. Lucy is if we're singling out a single person. This is probably my favorite topic to discuss when talking about Fairy Tail, and that's Makarov. Even if you hate Fairy Tail, how do you hate Makarov? He is hands down my favorite character in the show. I thought he was extremely well written and consistent through the entire show. And that's another thing I can give Fairy Tail is that it's consistency. They don't backpedal on their decisions, they just move forward. I'm aware each arc in the show can feel short and sorta out of nowhere. There are certain arcs I wish had a bit more screen time, but they do stay pretty consistent in this choice, even if you don't like it. Aside from maybe like 2 or 3 arcs if I can remember. Back to Makarov, I don't think the guild would nearly be as fun or dynamic as it would without Makarov. Looking at Sabretooth or Blue Pegasus, it's just a bunch of wizards doing shit. They don't really have anybody bringing them together, or a powerhouse you want to see when a fight breaks loose. We all like when something's not looking good and the old dude or the person with the most experience fighting pulls up, you know shit's about to go down. When the guildmaster from Blue Pegasus pulls up, what's he gonna do? Kiss him? And Sting don't count. He's not really a guildmaster. He's just a guildmaster by title, since they don't treat him like an authoritative figure. And we know he's not all that. I mean, he got his ass whooped by Natsu because of the power of friendship. How do you lose a fight because a dude is screaming about his friends? Makarov, though, was an absolute powerhouse. Anytime he was on screen during a fight, you know he was down to whoop some ass. When he pulled up to Phantom Lord and he was shattering the entire building by walking was so hype. We knew he was strong, but not that strong. I want to mention the sentiment he carries through the entire show, and that everybody in the guild is family and that those are his children. This ties back to the feeling that you're a part of the guild, so when he gives off these speeches, that if you hurt his children, you will be punished tenfold, and I felt that. All of Makarov's speeches always felt emotional and had meaning behind them. I really believe that he thought everybody as his children, and he was somebody to look up to, and it makes sense that the guild wants to protect that, which is what gives them their strength. You'd do anything for your parents too, right? Here's the part of Makarov I really hate talking about. It was one of the worst decisions I have ever seen made in a show, and I can't defend this. At the end of the war arc, in Fairy Tail's final season, Makarov gives off one last speech. I should mention, big spoiler warning, the guild is surrounded by tens upon tens of thousands of soldiers, and there is no winning this fight. Everyone is tired and exhausted, and can barely fight anymore. Makarov, being one of the few left standing, takes it upon himself to cast Fairy Law, one of Fairy Tail's 3 sacred spells that only high-ranking members of Fairy Tail even know, let alone know how to use. So in one final last-ditch effort, Makarov takes his stance to begin casting Fairy Law, when interrupted by the guild's first master, warning him of the consequences of using a spell that dangerous, as it drains the caster's life for each enemy hit, and so, Makarov says,
"But I can't wait for that outcome, not while my children's blood is shed, and so I have to end this. An old soldier like me has little time left, and if it means the young can go on living, I'll gladly pay that price."
Master!
Urza, listen to me.
No, please, don't do it! Keep going! Let me lead you back home!
Although you may face what seem like insurmountable odds, you will find the way forward if you work together. Trust in yourself, but don't forget that you're not alone. This guild is a family. The bond you share is unbreakable. My journey has been one filled with happiness and love, thanks to all of you.
I can only describe this moment with comparisons for those who hate Fairy Tail. Think of Whitebeard from One Piece, Jiraiya from Naruto, Maze Hughes from Full Metal, Kamina from Gurren Lagann. Think of these moments and how you felt. For someone who loves Fairy Tail, this was the saddest moment in the entire show. As a guy who was invested in the story at the time, I won't lie when I say I shed a tear or two. It was a heartbreaking moment for the show, but they just couldn't keep it like that. They ruined the moment they worked so hard towards by reviving Makarov. It was one of the most slap to the faces I've ever felt while watching anime. It is a decision I can't fathom on why they would ever want to bring Makarov back, and it's what really brings the show down a lot for me. I can go on and on for an hour on this topic alone, but I think you understand the frustration you would have felt if suddenly Whitebeard just stood back up after giving his speech. There's a lot of issues with Fairy Tail. Just Google Fairy Tail and you'll see somebody happily tearing into the show. The show is by no means bad. It doesn't have to be good by your prestigious Full Metal is the best anime ever standards, but that doesn't make the show bad. You're free to not like it. I mean, fuck, I hate Dragon Ball, but I know deep down it's not awful. I feel like most of the people tearing the show apart haven't actually seen it, or began a negative bias towards it after seeing someone shit on it. We're all aware of its flaws, but Fairy Tail has a lot of good moments too, that seem to get swept under the rug just because it's Fairy Tail. You're free to disagree with everything I said, but I personally really enjoy Fairy Tail, even with its flaws. The ending is a bit screwed with Makarov and Agnologia and everything afterwards, But it didn't ruin everything before that point for me, so I can say with a straight face, I like fairy tale.